Captain Ryan Oniell, RYANO''NEILL. I'm with the Canadian Detachment 552nd Air Control Wing, currently with the 964th Expeditionary Airborne Air Control Squadron, and I also fly with the 964th back at home. What I fly is the E3 AWACS. It is the airborne control platform for the United States Air Force. We have the ability to see much further and much deeper into places that most ground radars cannot see. The big black dish that's sitting on the back, called the Frisbee, that's what we use. That's the radar and the identification friend or foe, which uses transponders so we can see them. Okay, well, there's pretty much two parts of the team that make up the team. You have the flight deck, which I am part of as aircraft commander, with a co-pilot, flight engineer, and navigator. And then we have the mission crew, which has the mission crew commander, senior director, who's in charge of all the weapons guys, and the air surveillance officer, who's in charge of all the surveillance. Plus, we have all the necessary technicians that are on board to fix any equipment we need. And we have the electronic, the ECO, who's in charge of looking for things passively that normally you can't see. Well, there's myself, the aircraft commander. I'm in charge of the flight deck, making sure that we get the job done right and safely. I also have a co-pilot who sits, normally we sit left and then right seat for the co-pilot. He backs me up on everything and I back him up on everything, and we split the duties pretty much evenly. The flight engineer is in charge of all of this different systems on the plane that make it fly and that help augment the mission crew's systems, i.e. cooling and the fuel system, things like that, electrical. Then we have the navigator who's in charge of making sure that we fly in the right spot with all of his different gee-whiz toys, whether it's be a laptop with a GPS or a GPS built into the aircraft or an inertial navigation system. My job as the aircraft commander overall is for the safe and effective safety of flight and making sure that the mission goes off well. During engine start, the engineer is pretty much the quarterback of that whole process. He looks at his gauges, he's the one that actually runs it. When he hits the switch that introduces the air into the engine, he'll tell me when to add fuel. Co-pilot's backing me up by watching all the engine instruments and making sure that that air does go in, making sure that the fuel does go in, and we're listening also to the ground personnel who's telling us the visual signals, like the engine is actually physically turning. When the engine does light off, you can see the exhaust come out. And that's how we work as a team. We're always backing each other up. Even the navigator, some people think he's not involved in the engine start, but he's backing the engineer up because he's the second set of eyes that can look at his panel. Well, this aircraft was built in the 70s. So we're looking at, I don't know, maybe second generation as far as airline passenger jets. A lot of the technology involved in these aircraft are probably a little newer, but not much. Most of the money, as it should, goes into the back end of the aircraft, the weapons side, the fighting portion of the aircraft. So yes, we deal with steam-driven gauges, not like the new A380s that have all glass cockpit, TV screens and everything for them. So we're dealing with that. And a lot of the stuff that you would see in a modern creature comfort of the aircraft, we don't have. We do it old school. That's the way it is. And does it make it a little bit more difficult? Yeah, it can. I've been flying for 20 years, so it's something I'm used to. Okay, well, I started off as a first tour, first assignment instructor pilot out in Moose Jaw, where I taught students how to fly jets to get their wings. Following that, I went and flew the T-33, which is even older, back in 1950s vintage jet aircraft, where we flew as aggressor squadron against the F-18s, our fighter aircraft. Following that, I've flown the Hornet, and then I moved over onto the multi-engine side, where my last tour was a Buffalo aircraft, which is the turbine version of the Caribou for search and rescue on the west coast of Canada. And that has to probably be the most rewarding job in the world. This here is slightly different. We are the bus driver. We're not here to make the jet do fancy things. We're there to make sure that the jet gets where it needs to go safely so the guys in the back can do their job. Mostly it's a relatively high altitude. There are many aircraft that can fly much higher, but we put it at an altitude that optimizes for the radar to be able to look at all the things that it needs to. Yeah, and then we sit there and go round and round. We call it NASCAR at 400 knots as opposed to 250 miles an hour, but our track's a little bit bigger. My job is to make sure that the aircraft is in the right spot for us to be able to do the job. I don't worry about how they do their job in the back. He just tells me where we need to go, and we talk back and forth. Whether that means we're talking over the intercom back and forth, or I can get up and go back and look at his scope and he says, we need to be here for this area. And I'll say, well, that's not going to work because of this, and I can suggest, and we come up with a plan to make sure that this aircraft is in the spot where it needs to be to do the job. There's 5 Canadians on board this, and this is part of the NORAD agreement that we are in Tinker. We bring a different set of experiences back in Canada. We don't have AWACS, but like I said, I've got 8 different airframes. Major Wappler, who's the MCC, has air traffic control background. So we bring a different flavor to the crew, and they can see things that we do in a different way, and we take what they do well, and we try and integrate it together and make a good team. That has got to be the most challenging, and when I first saw it, the stupidest thing you would ever do, putting two large aircraft in that close proximity. However, it just extends the range, and it is such a unique and valuable skill to have. For us, it extends our mission out to over 20 hours we can do in the air without having to stop and air refuel, which keeps us in the fight, and we don't have to worry about landing, getting more fuel, and going back up, which could delay the process quite a bit. That's something I wish we could do a little bit more. We don't get to spend time talking to each other as much as we could. These guys are flying 2 to 3 lines a day. We fly 1 13-hour plus mission. So we don't get to interact as much, but we do have a fellow Canadian here who is actually on exchange with a tanker, so we get to talk to him a little bit. If we didn't have a tanker, we'd be going home early. Plain and simple. This jet runs on fuel and it needs fuel. So the tanker guys really, as we are supporting the warfighter on the ground, they're supporting us to support the warfighter on the ground. That's their job, and these guys are really good at doing it. Start off by talking to the aircraft commander of the jet, of the tanker that's coming in, so that we can get together, trying to bring these 2 aircraft in close proximity. Then we move on to talking with the boom operator, who helps us do that fine tuning at the end so that we're in the right spot for him to put the boom in and give us our gas. I wouldn't call it nervous, but it is a challenge because the ultimate in it is if we screw up during that period, the consequences are extremely high. So therefore, there is, maybe anxiety is not the word, but you do amp up a little bit because this is going to be a challenge, and it always is a challenge. It's never, oh, it's the same old, same old. You know, air is a little different, planes fly a little different, so you're always on your toes, working your butt off to try and get that gas so you can stay there that much longer. E3 mission, we bring the ability to see things and provide the picture for the commander that otherwise would not be there. Ground radar and ground radios only have so much length and ability to reach out and touch someone. We bring that. And if we can make the difference, giving the commander the right picture to make the right decision to save maybe 5 minutes on the ground where a trooper is getting shot at, and we can get that air asset that much faster. 5 minutes for that trooper makes all the difference in the world. It could be a lifetime to him. So if we can do that just once, it makes the mission worthwhile. We read, we study, we have autopilot, we still have to monitor. We do watch movies, and the other thing we do is we're constantly planning and preparing for what could happen. What if we don't have that tanker? What's the plan we're going to do? What if an emergency happens? Where are we going to go? We're not exactly surrounded by all friendly countries when we're in the theater of operations, so we have to have a plan. We talk about things like that. And other times we just talk about system stuff. Hey, you know, what happens if this goes wrong? And then we get the books out and do a little bit of studying. Try and use up that time valuable. Prior to this airplane, 6 hours is the longest I'd ever been in an aircraft. Now that's just a nice short hop for us. So you got to get up, you got to move, all the stuff that you read about in the newspapers of, you know, your deep vein thrombosis, all that sort of stuff. We just have to get up, move around, eat, stay hydrated, and try and pass the time, because you have to be sharp at any point and any time. Unlike the mission crew who do have their breaks, like during air refueling, we don't get that opportunity. We always have to be ready because anything at any time can go wrong for us up front. So we're just trying to keep ourselves sharp as best we can.